Welcome to Quick Takes. If you want to know who's winning the Chinese Communist Party's internal power struggles, just watch who appears and who doesn't appear. Just a few months ago, Xi Jinping looked like he had won or reclawed back some of his power that he had lost. His rivals appeared weakened. Zhang Youxia and Liu Zhongli have been investigated. His allies seemingly regained control of the military, and his position looks secure. But today, that picture looks again very different. And over the past few days, the CCP may have unintentionally revealed that Xi's faction is losing its grip on power once again. Now, every July 1st, the Chinese Communist Party celebrates its party founding date. And so this first clue actually came from Xi's speech, although it's not very telling. So a lot of people saw the speech and argued that Xi Jinping was trying to elevate himself to the level of Mao Zedong by dividing the party history into 4 eras, ending with what he calls Xi Jinping's new era. But I don't actually think that's the story, because the framework wasn't introduced this year or in the speech. The party officially adopted it back in 2021, effectively right before the 20th Party Congress, the height of Xi's one-man rule power. Now, what actually caught my attention is this one, what he left out. In previous years, official party speeches repeatedly emphasized Xi Jinping as the party's unquestioned leadership, or the core leadership. At this year's transcript, you can see that it's noticeably been toned down on that term, the core leadership, in the language. And instead of repeatedly focusing on Xi Jinping himself, it emphasized the collective party leadership, which you could argue is a signal of returning to the collective leadership of Hu Jintao, which we'll talk a little bit more later. But by itself, this doesn't necessarily prove anything, because sometimes the speech do fluctuate, right? But it's the first clue. And the second clue comes from the military personnel. So across both the party anniversary concert and the official July 1st celebration, both events, the order of the senior military officers that appeared was exactly the same. So there wasn't any personnel changes in the seating part. Now, in the Chinese military, these public appearances, they're often read as sort of a preview of who's going to be in the leadership seats. And several of the officers seated near the top are widely expected to enter China's highest military command, which is the Central Military Commission. And so one person really stands out to me. His name is Zhu Chuangsheng. You don't have to remember this name, but you just need to kind of understand why he's important. Over the past year, Zhu has moved up at a tremendous speed in the military hierarchy. It's just insane, because he was transferred into the Eastern Theater Command, which by itself is already pretty important, because that's the theater that oversees the Taiwan invasion. A month or two later, he was then moved again into the Central Command to join the Joint Staff Department, which is essentially like the chair of the Joint Chiefs Committee. So you're responsible for planning and organizing military operations and actions. So if he's again promoted after this, he'll likely become a member of the Central Military Commission. So that's very important, because Zhu isn't known as one of Xi Jinping's longtime proteges. In fact, much of his recent rise has occurred after Zhang Youxia, as we've been talking about in the past year, emerged as the replacement of Xi's control of the military. Now, because we know that now Zhang Youxia is nowhere to be found, he's probably dead, or under heavy investigation, but somehow Zhang still hasn't been indicted. So it just shows you that it's very complex in who exactly actually controls the military, and Xi Jinping definitely isn't the one that has the grip, as we would compare to a few months ago. So let's just see if the next generation of commanders coming in will be from overwhelmingly Xi Jinping's own network or people outside of it. Because right now it doesn't look like he's able to pick the people to replace those that he brought down. So it's significant because of that. And because Xi Jinping spent more than a decade trying to reshape the military, so loyal to him, anybody that is not part of the Xi Jinping circle that gets to be promoted is actually a big signal to the fact that he's no longer in control, right? Okay, and then one more clue. This doesn't come from the military. It comes from who was present at the event. And this person, I don't know if you guys remember the name Hu Jintao. I mentioned it just now, but he was the top leader before Xi Jinping. And he was also the one that got dragged out of the 20th Party Congress, which everybody at the time thought that this was like Xi Jinping's overwhelming control, right? Right before our eyes. Like, that was pretty shocking to the world. And that the former leader had been escorted out just by the orders of Xi Jinping. And this week, what happened was one of Hu Jintao's closest allies, his chief of staff essentially, he reappeared in public. His name is Chen Shiju. And outside of China, nobody knows who he is, but inside the party, he's basically only known for one thing. He spent roughly 40 years working for Hu Jintao. So he is literally Hu's personal aide for like 40 years. When Hu retired, Chen remained a senior official inside the party's general office, but he retired himself in 2023. And this is much earlier than some of the officials at his level would normally do. Since then, he's had almost completely disappeared from public view, and not until now, except until now, because at this year's party anniversary concert, Chen suddenly appeared again. And not only that, he was seated in the second row directly behind Xi Jinping. Now, if Xi Jinping's power was expanding, this is kind of the signal that would be opposite of what happens, because you would not want any of Hu Jintao's sort of peers, influence, or any sort of presence to be there, right? Then last but not least, most Americans probably have never even heard of this. It's called a Central National Security Commission. Think of it as pretty similar to what the National Security Council in the White House will be like. But in China, it has broader authority, overseas intelligence, political security, counter-espionage, and many of the party's most sensitive national security decisions. Earlier this year, Vice Foreign Minister Sun Weidong quietly disappeared from his post. And then it was announced that he had been removed, but it didn't have a follow-up as to where he was going. His profile was just deleted off of the foreign ministry website that same day the announcement came. And then rumors started, right? Several media suggested that he had been transferred into the National Security Commission, which is like responsible for running the day-to-day operations. If that's true, then that's one of the most powerful security jobs in China. Others believe that he simply had been pushed aside and was just heading into retirement. But then because he came back during the anniversary concert, it seems to me like, again, where he was sitting, seating arrangements are super important, right? It often reveals somebody's political ranks before they formally announce it. Based on where he was seated, he probably have already assumed the senior national security position. If that's true, again, he's not somebody associated with Xi Jinping's innermost political circle. And then also 4 of China's most powerful provincial party leaders also didn't show up. They did this remote viewing instead and then just hosted some events afterwards, which I thought was quite weird because sure, there's a perfectly normal explanation to it. Maybe they were busy, but it didn't look like they had any obligations or emergencies or anything that kept them away from coming into Beijing. For some reason, they just didn't show up, and it just happens that these 4 are also Xi Jinping's allies. So when you look at the personnel difference between this year versus last year, you can immediately tell that certain things are just not right. You know, for somebody who is so set on maintaining control and set on keeping stability in its power, appearance, image, and everything else, this is absolutely not normal. So this is just a quick take on what's been happening in the CCP's power politics. And when July 1st happened, it seems more than anything a major sort of signal to Xi's current power state. So thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you next time.